My daughters are older than 23. In fact, they're a lot older than 23. But I can tell you this, I knew where they were and I knew what they were doing when they were 23, and I saw them still not as adults. It's an issue. 23 years old is someone that's just young, just getting out of college, just starting their career. And yes, they're an adult. They are an adult. And the choices they make, they're responsible for. But imagine how young Cassidy Hutchinson was at 23 years old when all of this on January 6th went down. And yet she had achieved the goal of being a player in the White House. She had worked for Steve Scalise, congressman. She had worked for Ted Cruz, senator. She had worked for all of these individuals and had made her way because of her talents and her dedication to the conservative movement to the White House, to the chief of staff's chief. So for her to take the stand and testify against President Trump, and when I say against, I'm not saying she's testifying against him because it's a personal thing or anything. She's just telling the truth. She's just getting up and answering questions as they're asked. And I want to share some of that with you. Guys, we're going to play number one. And the one we're going to play is about the fact that Donald Trump knew that this mob was armed. Take a listen to this.
I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away. In this particular instance, it wasn't the capacity of our space. It was the mags and the people that didn't want to come through. And that's what Tony had been trying to relay to him that morning. It's not the issues that we encountered on the campaign. We have enough space, sir. They don't want to come in right now. They have weapons that they don't want confiscated by the Secret Service, and they're fine on the mall. They can see you on the mall, and they want to march straight to the Capitol from the mall.
Ms. Hutchinson, what we saw when those clips were playing were photos provided by the National Archives showing the president in the offstage tent before his speech on the ellipse. You were in some of those photos as well. And I just want to confirm that that is when you heard the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him and that he wanted the Secret Service to remove the magnetometers.
So a magnetometer, you're not going through one if you're going to get close to the President of the United States. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it because you can be armed. And the president knew that the crowd he had asked to come were armed. He knew that. He knew that. His staff knew the potential for trouble. And they knew after being told to go march on the Capitol what might happen. In fact, take a listen to cut 2.
We understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that you also spoke to Mr. Cipollone on the morning of the 6th as you were about to go to the rally on the ellipse. And Mr. Cipollone said something to you like, make sure the movement to the Capitol does not happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And that might happen. That might happen. They knew what was going on, and they knew the danger of sending these armed individuals to the Capitol. They knew it. They knew they were armed. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever lose that. Don't ever let anyone tell you that it wasn't and it had nothing to do with the administration. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, he wanted to be part of it. The President of the United States wanted to be part of it. Just take a listen to cut 3.
Tony proceeded to tell me that when the president got in the Beast, he was under the impression from Mr. Meadows that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, we don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing. The president had very strong, a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
So ask yourself this, ladies and gentlemen. You know now that he wanted to go to the Capitol, that he was the leader of that mob. You know that he knew that there were weapons involved, but he stated they weren't after him. Just imagine that. An angry mob armed is headed to the Capitol, and the President of the United States wanted to go there and be their leader. Now, here's the spin that's out there right now, that they call it the Beast. That's the presidential vehicle, whatever he's in, as they go about protecting it with Secret Service protection. In that particular day, it's a Suburban. It's not a limo, like in many cases. And so what they're out there spinning is that you can't get access to the front seat from the Beast. But what they're not realizing as they go out and spin, and they might realize that they're just lying about, is that it's the Suburban where you do have access. You do have the ability to get there. So, just to show you how violent he can be and how bad he can pout when he's not getting his way, I want you to take a listen to cut 4. Just listen to this.
I remember hearing noise coming from down the hallway, so I poked my head out of the office, and I saw the valet walking towards our office. He had said, "Get the chief down to the dining room, the president wants him." So Mark went down to the dining room and came back to the office a few minutes later. After Mark had returned, I left the office and went down to the dining room, and I noticed that the door was propped open, and the valet was inside the dining room changing the tablecloth off of the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in and then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantle and the TV, where I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. The valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at the Attorney General's AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall, which was causing them to have to clean up. So I grabbed a towel and started wiping the ketchup off of the wall to help the valet out. And he said something to the effect of, "He's really ticked off about this. I would stay clear of him for right now. He's really, really ticked off about it."
I asked Dakota Rudisell earlier if he had ever asked for a pardon. And he broke out laughing and said no, he hadn't. And I've never asked for a pardon. I don't know about you. Have you ever asked for a pardon? Because my assumption is there isn't one person watching this who had. Unless they're Rudy Giuliani watching this. Unless they're Mark Meadows watching this. Because they did. Along with a lot of other people that were involved in the administration. You don't ask for a pardon unless you know you're in trouble, and you don't ask for a pardon, usually, unless you committed a crime. I'm sorry. That's the background of asking for a pardon. Just take a listen to cut 5 here.
Ms. Hutchinson, did Rudy Giuliani ever suggest that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
He did.
Ms. Hutchinson, did White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ever indicate that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
Mr. Meadows did seek that pardon. Yes, ma'am.
Nobody seeks a pardon unless they're in trouble. Nobody does. And the reason is because they caused all this, or they could have done something about this, right? They could have done something about this. Even when it was going on, they could have done what they possibly could have to stop it. Here it is, right there. Everybody's like, well, how are you going to get in touch with your mob once they're rioting, once they're attacking the Capitol? Right there. Text them. Get a hold of them. Do whatever you can. You know, there was a member of the North Dakota media right in the Capitol. Text him. Tell him to go up and tell his friends to knock it off. I don't know. I know this. They owed it to stop it. In fact, the one individual that didn't want to get involved or knew who wasn't going to stop it was the president. Take a listen to cut 6.
When Tony and I went in to talk to Mark that morning, Mark was sitting on his couch and on his phone, which was something typical. And I remember Tony just got right into it. I was like, sorry, I just want to let you know, and had informed him, like, this is how many people we have outside the mags right now. These are the weapons that we're known to have. It's possible he listed more weapons off that I just don't recall. I remember distinctly Mark not looking up from his phone.
And when you finally were able to give Mr. Meadows the information about the violence at the Capitol, what was his reaction?
He almost had a lack of reaction. I remember him saying, all right, something to the effect of, how much longer does the president have left in his speech? Mark still hadn't popped out of his office or said anything about it. So that's when I went into his office. I saw that he was sitting on his couch, on his cell phone. Same as the morning where he was just kind of scrolling and typing. The rioters are getting really close. Have you talked to the president? He said, no, he wants to be alone right now. Still looking at his phone. So I start to get frustrated because, you know, I sort of felt like I was watching this is not a great comparison, but a bad car accident that was about to happen where you can't stop it, but you want to be able to do something. And I remember thinking in that moment, Mark needs to snap out of this, and I don't know how to snap him out of this, but he needs to care. And I just remember I blurted out, I said, Mark, do you know where Jim's at right now? And he looked up at me at that point and said, Jim? And I said, Mark, he was on the floor a little while ago giving a floor speech. Did you listen? He said, yeah, it was real good. Did you like it? And I said, yeah. Do you know where he's at right now? He said, well, no, I haven't heard from him. And I said, you might want to check in with him, Mark. And I remember pointing at the TV and I said, the rioters are getting close. They might get in.
Blood will be on your hands. You're about to hear it. They knew it. They knew it. Take a listen to cut 7.
And I remember Pat saying to him something to the effect of, the rioters have gotten to the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now. And Mark looked up at him and said, he doesn't want to do anything, Pat. And Pat said something to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands.
So is she lying? I mean, many of you are going to say, she was there, right? I mean, you're not hearing her say this in second person. She's there. She's talking about it. She heard it. Or is she lying? Because that's what many of you conservatives believe, right? She's just lying, looking for attention. In fact, Donald Trump's out there spinning that she didn't get invited to Mar-a-Lago, and so she's going about lying. You know how you can counter that? Without spinning on social media, without sitting there and trying to wreck a young woman's life, which it's probably wrecked anyway, because of what her goals were in life and what's going on now in her life. In fact, she needs protection from the FBI. Her life is in danger after this. No different than what Mike Pence's life was put in danger by this administration. But there's a way. There's a way, if you believe she's lying, to make sure that you tell people she's lying. You put your right hand to God. You go in front of the committee and you say, you know what? I'm here to testify. My name is Mark Meadows. She worked for me. She's wrong. That didn't happen. Now, I'm not saying I'd take his word over her word. What I would say is now we've got a dispute that I've got to be looking at, but he won't testify. He's not going to testify. He's taking the fifth. So don't give me that crap of, oh, man, she's lying, or, oh, it's just in second person. This is a 25-year-old woman with the courage to stand up in front of the United States of America, in fact, the world, and say what was going on in the administration on January 6th. She has more courage than any man around the President of the United States, period, including the President of the United States. Now, I've got one more clip that I want to play for you. I mentioned Mike Pence. I mentioned lives being in danger. Take a listen to cut 8.
I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong.
You saw the crowd. You saw the clips. You now know that they were armed. You know there was ARs there. You know there was knives there. You know that there was knives put on the end of American flags so that they could be used as bayonets. These same people who are constantly saying you've got to honor the American flag turned and used those American flags on Americans and bludgeoned them with those flags. If they had gotten to Mike Pence, he'd be dead. He'd be dead. And be honest with yourself. Just be honest with yourself. Do you possibly believe that if that mob had gotten to Mike Pence, which they were just some feet away, seconds away from getting to the vice president, if they had gotten to him, they'd say, Mike, we just came here to talk to you. We just want to talk to you if we can. We'd really like you to consider not certifying the election. That's all we're asking. Just don't certify the election. Go back into the Senate and look at it and say, look, there's a lot of concerns out there about the falsehood of these elections, even though Republican secretaries of state certified them, even though the law requires you to actually certify the election, even though you're following exactly what elections are set up to do. What we want you to do, Vice President Pence, is just go back in the room and reconsider your actions. Is that what they were going to do? Is that what that mob would have done to Mike Pence? And when the President of the United States knew this was going on, knew who their target was, because they were told that's who that should be their target, right? They were told that's who should be your target. When that mob got to that Capitol and did what they did, if they had gotten to Mike Pence, what do you think they would have done? Just be honest with yourself. What do you think they would have done? He wouldn't be here anymore. These are the last miles for down the road. There will be no more down the road after this. You might see some reruns. You might see some of the shows that we have done before, but you're not going to see any new ones. Some years ago, it'd be a couple years ago or a little bit over maybe, Derek Bulova, the manager of Beck, came to me with a concept of Beck News. And we talked about what we can do, which I appreciate him doing. I do. I appreciate him looking at what we did on my radio show, News and Views, and saying, look, we want to pattern something about the conversations that you're having there. You understand media. You've got an experience in politics after 14 years in the legislature. You've got a good contact list. So let's do something. And then we talked about concepts. And in the end, this is what we came up with. And he gave me the opportunity to do this. And he gave me the opportunity to work with a very, very professional staff at Beck TV, at Beck News. And I thank them for that opportunity. In the end, all things end. They do. In this particular case, it's down the road. So we're not going to do the show anymore. I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss the opportunity to communicate with you in this medium. And yet I'm going to track it. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to try to find out how it's going. I want Beck News to succeed. I do, because it's been part of my life, and I think I've worked really hard to help it. Now, We've offered a very professional show. I want to thank Amy Eiler, who's been my help and my producer here. I think we've brought guests to you that play out on a world stage. In fact, I know we do. So I think we've delivered a good product. I hope you enjoyed it, but most of all, I want to thank you, the viewer, for having watched it. It's been good riding with you, folks.